So good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are, everybody. Today we wanted to talk about how to be a good customer. Traditionally, when customers are viewing the success of their outsourcing, it doesn't focus on performance research. So there's plenty of water cooler type talk, anecdotal and informal information about the supplier strengths and weaknesses. But today we're going to turn the tables and we're going to ask a different question. We're going to ask, am I a good customer? And am I doing the best I can as a customer to help make the outsourcing relationship and engagement a success? So the goal of today's panel discussion is to understand what can we as customers do to improve the results of the outsourcer's performance for our business. I'm very interested in hearing the recommendations from our two supplier executives on how they believe customers can help increase the success of the outsourcing results, as well as our customer executive, who is going to share his insights on how he optimizes the outsourcing results. So with that, I turn it over to Kyle Andrew, who's our moderator today. He's chairman of IAOP Sales and Marketing Chapter, and he will get the panel discussion underway.
Great, Sherry. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. I'm very excited about this. We like to find ways to join with some other chapters to bring some great content. And Sherry and I discussed this back at IAOP in February, and she came up with the topic, and I'm excited to be a part of that. So today we have a great panel, and three people. As she said, we've got a provider and two suppliers. I'm sorry, a customer and two suppliers. And I'd like to just introduce them first one by one. And then I'm going to give each of them a minute or so to discuss kind of what they bring to the table. What is their viewpoint? So first, I'm going to introduce Michael Nacarato. He is a buy-side ambassador for IAOP. Michael has designed, developed, and implemented multiple global outsourcing programs in India, the Philippines, Costa Rica, and the Caribbean, therefore providing his business partners with key strategic opportunities to increase operational effectiveness, efficiencies, and strengthen the business community. Michael is very engaged with IAOP. In fact, he currently sits on the Strategic Advisory Board. He's a certified outsourcing professional. He chairs the IAOP's Texas chapter, and he's also the co-chair of the Voice of the Customer chapter, which is part of this meeting today. He's also a regular workshop speaker at annual outsourcing summit. So if you've been to IAOP, there's a chance that you've met and had a chance to chat with Michael. So Michael, why don't I give you a minute here to just kind of talk about your viewpoint and what you plan to bring to today's discussion.
All right, thank you, Kyle. I appreciate that. I'll start off by explaining my role in my organization. I run third-party risk management and also have some other responsibilities here at Transamerica with procurement and records information management, and we have some SOX controls team that helps support a well-rounded third-party risk program. We are a separate group. I'm not the business. I'm not the one outsourcing the business processes, but I am a first-line business partner. I'm there every step of the way with the business to help them through each of the outsourcing life cycle phases, and then making sure we're obviously in compliance with our internal policies, as well as whichever regulator, state or federal regulator that we're under. So what the advantages of that model is, it allows our business partners to really concentrate on the business while we help support them and navigate the dynamics of the end-to-end outsourcing life cycle. And this is a topic I'm really passionate about. As a matter of fact, I dug out an old presentation I had presented at the European Summit in Frankfurt back in 2015, and it was all about how we get value out of the relationship. And I keep telling my business partners that it's a we, it's not a us versus them, and where we have very specific roles and responsibilities in helping our partner. And we chose that partner, right? And we have very clear responsibilities in helping our partner be successful. So hopefully through this conversation, we'll be able to talk about a couple of very specific areas where us as the client have a critical role in our partner success.
Great, Michael, thanks very much for that perspective. Next, I'd like to introduce Vijay Verma. Vijay is one of the key leaders who set the foundation of HCL's infrastructure business in North America and further engineered his success as the business line became synonymous with global leadership and service excellence. He has spearheaded strategic transformation programs for many Fortune 500 clients, helping them increase value through effectiveness, efficiency, and customer sat all at the same time. A career HC Light and part of HCL's senior management trainee program, Vijay has held many positions, including founding partner of HCL's cybersecurity practice, working with the CEO's office and product management. Known to be a frontline leader, he takes independent charge and P&L responsibility and heads the retail and CPG business for HCL America. So Vijay, I'll let you share a little bit of your perspective.
Thank you. Thanks, Kyle. And thank you so much for including me as part of the panel. And I totally agree with the perspective which Michael talked about. It's a very interesting topic. What we are seeing in the marketplace is that there is so much of disruption which is happening. You know, businesses, they're trying to redefine themselves. In this scenario, the need of the hour is to create an environment where both the parties, you know, the vendor and the customer, they work as a trusted partner. It is coming together and being one team. And I echo with Michael when he says it is not us, it is we, you know. It is one team, one goal, aligning our objectives to the business needs of the company. So where the supplier becomes a trusted partner, you know, driving the culture of relationship beyond contract. If you see, it is when you sign such long-term contract, it's like a marriage. You have certain objective in mind, but the objective, it's like a moving target. It changes over next 12, 18 months. You should be able to have a culture which is beyond the contract and also driving the culture of ideapreneurship, driving the culture of innovation, how both the parties can come together and unlock the value of innovation. That's where my thoughts are, Kyle.
Okay, great. Thank you, Vijay, very much. And finally, the second of our supplier panelists here, David Althoff. He is a senior vice president and SBU leader of Cognizant's insurance practice based in Chicago. For over 22 years, he's been helping insurance and financial services leaders discover the path to being digital at scale in a way that makes sense for the organizations and their customers. He works with clients to infuse digital thinking and technologies into the front, middle, and back office to foster innovation, spur intelligent automation, and create new products and services that fuel business performance. Prior to his current role, he served as a client partner and insurance industry leader with organizations including Ernst & Young, PricewaterhouseCoopers, IBM Global Services, and Detroit. He's got a bachelor's degree from Purdue University, go Big Ten, and his MBA from Northwestern University. He's a recipient of the Distinguished Alumni Award from Purdue University and has been a keynote speaker at several U.S. universities in the Midwest, including Purdue, Northwestern, and Illinois State. So, David, the floor is yours to share some perspective.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. So I think very similar to, you know, I most certainly kind of echo what Michael and Vijay had talked about. And maybe the one additional aspect that I think we'll probably talk a bit about today is if I look at kind of what the expectations are from both customers as well as us as providers, not only is it an us and or a kind of a we conversation versus, you know, us versus them kind of thing, but I think beyond that, it even starts to get into really blending together the organizations. If you think about how a lot of IT work gets done anymore and a lot of business process services work, it's much more of a move away from individual solutions that do everything and much more into a where's the best of breed, how do I piece these together, how do I become a solid integrator of all the different components that allow me to be a truly differentiated value to my consumer, whomever that may be. And I think part of that becomes we also need to bring services to the table that move beyond what used to just be low-cost labor arbitrage and even beyond traditional IT services and much more into the world of how do we actually bring true value-added services to the table? As Vijay mentioned, kind of that idea of where is your business trying to go? What are your business objectives? How do we support those through being able to enable kind of resources, both people, dollars, products, whatever they may be to be able to use as effectively and as efficiently and flexibly as they possibly can. So I think a big element of that becomes a really differentiated experience that says, how do we kind of sidle up next to our clients here and say, how do we both attack this problem? How do we bring the value of what we have as a firm across the entire gamut of potential solutions, all the way from initial thought and new product through incubator processes, investment services, how that goes all the way then through the traditional IT services, business process services, and really looking at what we do around a managed business process as opposed to just managing a system. So I think that's really kind of where this goes. And I think a big piece of today's discussion becomes, what does that even mean? How do we measure that? How do you kind of track that relative to the value that's being provided? And how do you really meet the expectations that we both need to have of one another to get the most value out of that?
Great. David, thank you. It's interesting. I kind of hear in all of this, I kind of still hear that it, you know, with all the technology we have, it's kind of still about the people, it seems like, anyway, to me. So I'm excited to start the conversation. So Michael, I'm gonna actually pose the first question in your direction, and then I'm gonna ask a similar thing from the other side. But from a customer perspective, if you think back a couple of years, what were the traditional expectations you had of your suppliers? And today, are those expectations just now assumed to always be there? And if so, kind of what are the new and or evolving expectations?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kyle. And when you look back at the beginning of outsourcing, and I know, gosh, back in 2000, when I first did my first outsourcing deal, back then it was an environment of you have to pilot everything, right? People weren't sold on outsourcing as a strategic lever, and the only way you could really convince senior executives was with the arbitrage, right? That's all anybody wanted to see. They got intoxicated in the arbitrage and really didn't want to concentrate on anything else. But then once you did your pilot, you got your proof of concept, and the arbitrage was real. It was there. But you stayed for the quality, and I think that's part of the evolution. They went there for arbitrage. We stayed for quality, and then over time, and I'd say in the last 5 or 6 years, I see more of a focus where, to your point, arbitrage is some sort of arbitrage is assumed. The quality is there. That's why you have the proof of concept. The next generation are companies and companies I've been a part of. We now wanted to leverage it for the broad industry expertise that the outsourcers had developed over the past years by getting best in breed, best practices from all the clients that they've been serving. And now we look for them to help us with a leap in modernization, right? A lot of companies have done a lot of M&A work, and they've got multiple disparate, platforms, and take years for them to figure it out, or they can go to some industry experts who, again, have done this for others. It lets the client focus on higher value revenue generating or product development, while they can go to experts, especially around the IT space and modernization. And then there's also the element where you now look for a partner that could help give you a competitive advantage. So I think it's come a long way from, from arbitrage to really being a part of a go-forward modernization and competitive advantage strategy.
Interesting. Do you think that is, that whole competitive advantage piece and leap in modernization, is that kind of I mean, there's a lot of types of outsourcing deals around the world. Are you in this case talking more of the kind of the really bigger deals, or can you differentiate? Do you think that some deals like this are back in kind of the old days as far as what they're looking for, but are there segments of the industry that are more like this than the other? I'm just curious.
I would say that there'd be a focus of more technology dependent industries and getting the modernization and consolidation of platforms. At first for the arbitrage, it was more of the repetitive rote activities, but as the confidence grew when clients saw the quality, I think there's an equal part of where folks are getting into the boardrooms and conference rooms and saying, all right, what are our core activities? What are the core activities that we need to focus on that can really help drive revenue or drive us to the next level? And that's when more non-traditional back office operations were now being outsourced as well. So I think a small deal, a 100-person BPO deal could give a company just as much as a strategic advantage by letting them, again, gain some of the arbitrage, but direct their focus and concentration on really developing product and driving revenue and really focusing on their core business. And anything that's non-core, leveraging that with a strategic partner. And again, sometimes making those quantum leaps in capabilities, through technology. Okay,
great. That's good. That's good to know. So Vijay, let me come to you on this one. I want to look at this more from the customer side. Now that we've heard from the customer, I'm thinking the supplier perspective on that same question. What were the traditional expectations you had of your customers back then? And again, are those expectations just assumed now to be in place, and how they evolve from your side of the house?
Yeah. So first of all, I totally agree with Michael in terms of it's a journey from being a vendor to becoming a truly trusted partner. And I agree that it's a journey from being a supplier to solve the cost issue for the customer, then becoming a revenue partner. Can you help in terms of driving or solving my revenue problem? So can you become a revenue partner? It's no longer expecting IT SLAs of uptime, but more focus on revenue growth, focus on zero outages, no disruption to the business. But looking from a supplier perspective, the expectation from the customer is that, and this is purely my perspective, is try not to judge what your supplier is doing from a point of distrust. Customers who have succeeded in this relationship with the suppliers have complete trust that their supplier is on their side. So trust is one of the core, component or ingredient. We have seen, customers tend to box the suppliers based on what their perception is of the supplier, and what happens is that limits the supplier's ability to get maximum value, from the provider. So it limits themselves to bring the entire power might of the company. So I think it's the point is to being fair, and discussion with the supplier does not always have to be a zero-sum game. Customers who have approached the relationship in a more open frame of mind, tend to get the best out of service provider. And while also when you're structuring the contract with the supplier, please make sure that the scope is very tightly locked in. Some of the customers, they prefer the scope to be written at a very macro level with a lot of gray areas, by design to allow some discussions and adjustment. What happens is this invariably results in misunderstanding, and it leads to unnecessary heartburn, which we have seen,
Mm-hmm.
It is always advisable to tell your supplier your goals. It's okay to do that. Service provider do use that information very wisely to a larger part, and I think, we should always look for opportunities for mutual success.
Okay.
And that's
Sorry,
my
go ahead.
perspective.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, that's excellent. So a lot of your experience is in the whole, the CPG spaces, and I look at in retail, and I look at David kind of in the insurance side. David, is that similar or the same in the insurance side for you? And does that align, really well with what Vijay talked about? Does it matter what the vertical is when it comes to that?
I don't think it necessarily matters what the vertical is so much. I mean, I completely agree with kind of the points that Vijay made. And I think as you kind of think about the work that we do, the bigger piece I think becomes along those lines of trust. And I think Vijay said it very well, right? Which is, look, none of us benefit by, for lack of a better word, trying to get one over on the other party, right? So I think there's a lot of times where there's a general belief based on kind of some of the past years of doing work with people that becomes I'm sure you've got an angle here. How does the angle play out for the best of you? And I think the bottom line is kind of that topic of being a good customer is truly you really do need to trust your provider. I mean, it does us no good to not have our ability to get you to where you want to go as fast, as efficiently, and as effective as you can possibly get there. Because I think like anything, we look at all this and say, look, our business is built at this point, and I don't mean to give this too much of a short shrift, but by and large, all of the large providers have all sorts of capabilities, right? We all are very capable of doing a lot of different things. And really the magic to that comes from how do we match with you on a personal basis? How do we fit the needs of what you need us to be? How do you take those pieces and parts and get out of them what you need from there? And to Vijay's point, there's some areas where, look, you need to be very specific about what you're asking to have done so that we can be very clear about how we build the most effective team to do that. And there's some other areas where you may say, look, a little bit of gray is okay, as long as we know we're partners and we know we're in this together, because what we generally try to tie all that to is, what is that business goal? How do we help you get there? What can we best bring to the table? And probably the biggest piece to me is, once you've got the contracting and things done, then it moves into, let's really have a relationship. And just like you would with your internal business partners, help me understand what is the problem you're trying to deal with. And I'll give you a very simple example. We've got a lot of clients at times that will come and say, you guys just gave me, an increased invoice for something that you did. Well, I don't think that you really did what I expected you to do. Can you cut that in half? And that's going to naturally just be a conflict, as opposed to maybe coming and saying, you know what, I've got some cost pressures. I'm trying to find a way to cut $500,000 out of my budget. Can you help me do that? I mean, that's a very simple example, but that goes all the way up to as well of understanding, I'm really struggling with how to get the most out of out of tomorrow's consumer, right? What is the millennial generation looking for here? How can I get the most out of my distribution channels? Understanding what the actual business problem is. The real value I think that we bring to the table is we do this time and time and time again, not only in our own verticals, but look, I have my counterparts across the other verticals that I work in. So we all talk to each other. We all know each other. We all talk about the kinds of problems that each other are facing and how can we best leverage what we do? What are some of those unique solutions? So that idea of being able to say, look, if you speak to us from the standpoint of here's my problem, then we can help you. And we are absolutely typically incented to try to help you find a very creative solution to those things. And again, I think the core belief of that is because, and I'm sure everybody in this panel believes the same thing, which is if we do well by you, and that at times means, kind of cannibalizing our own revenue at clients and other things is perfectly fine, because the idea there is if you feel good about what we just did, you're going to want more of that. That's the bottom line of this. So I think it really does boil down to, how do we best do that? How do we best get you there? How do we best enable you to say, here's what I need you to be now in this area versus that area? And our ability to say, yep, I can do that. Here's how we work to get you there. And here's how I can help get you to whatever that next step may be.
Got it. Trust in the truth, right?
Yeah, and Kyle, just to add to what David said, if you see, nobody saw a recession coming in 2007, 2008, and the companies were in long-term contract with the supplier. Either it was a hosting contract or an outsourcing contract, and especially on manufacturing and retail CPG, we had seen the revenues of the companies falling 10 to 15% quarter on quarter. The expectation from the business was that go and talk to your supplier and ask them to reduce the cost. But the number of servers stayed the same. Number of calls coming to the service desk was same. Number of network or security gears were same. So there were suppliers who never looked into the contract, and they did what was right for the client at the time, for the customer at the time.
Right.
And with an expectation that when you go up, when things improve, you will reciprocate the same. And that's the culture, that's the relationship beyond contract, which we are looking for.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense to me. So, so when it comes to these expectations and the way they have evolved and the direction they've evolved in, and I'm sure that some of those are simply non-negotiable. I am curious, and I think actually, Vijay, I'll stay with you on this one. I want to get your thoughts quickly. Why do you think that these expectations that we've talked about that have evolved in the way they have, and are there some that are just not negotiable, or do they depend on project size, timeline, expertise? It's probably a big question, but I'm curious what you think the reason is that these expectations have evolved how they have.
Yeah, I think one of the key reasons for the way the expectations have evolved over a period of time is, as I said earlier during the start of my introduction, was that if you see, there is so much of disruption which is happening in the marketplace. The business models are changing. Companies are trying to redefine themselves, especially on the retail CPG side. It is companies are trying to impact the entire ecosystem, and one of the key enablers in order to impact the ecosystem is through technology, so the lines between, the retail and CPG is blurring. The CPG companies are trying to get as closer to the consumer as possible. We have examples, so we have, like, for example, the Dollar Shave Club. It's become a poster child with respect to D2C,
Yeah.
So technology is defining the way you want to do the business. And we have so many examples in front of us, like Airbnb, Uber, putting the customer in forefront. So the new expectation is all about driving innovation. It is all about, enhancing the end user experience. It is all about creating an outcome-based engagement model, So expectations from customers are evolving in line with what I stated about,
Got it.
There is no leeway or traditional ways of delivering projects. It has to be now more agile with clear definition of timeline, outcome, delivered through next gen skill set, So that's my thought is, Kyle.
Okay. Michael, would that be different from the customer side?
No, actually, it's right aligned with the customer side, and everything that you're hearing and we're talking about today, right, is how the dynamic of the relationship is changing, right? And clients need to recognize that and be prepared to support it and nurture all the relationship dynamics. And you had asked a question, you know, about size or the program or the type of program. For the relationship to be successful, and I think Vijay, you had said it, you know, it begins with the contracting, having clear language in the contract, you know, on what you expect. For the client, it's really critical in the selection process. And Kyle, I think you were alluding to this, right? It's the right relationship, and when you're out there selecting a partner, it's critical for the client to select a partner that's right size for themselves as an organization, especially if they're just starting in outsourcing. And I think one of the pitfalls that clients fall into is they get blinded they go for the big marquee as opposed to the better match. So that's something you have to understand your relationship. You have to understand where you are in your maturation life cycle, because you're only going to get the level of service that's commensurate with your spend and your revenue, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard. And then what happens is you have these missed expectations if you're selecting a supplier that, quite honestly, is too big and too advanced for where you are in your cycle. But building that trust and confidence is critical. That's how the relationship gets off on the right step.
Got it. Well, and that makes sense. And actually, we're going to kind of ask, you know, a question around what you just talked about a little bit later. But I'm going to go now, since you kind of started down that path. I want to come back to David and talk a little bit, you know, from the supplier perspective. Is there really a best fit in the supplier's mind between customer and supplier size, whether it's size of company? Do you want to be the big fish in the small pond or the small fish in the big pond? You know, elaborate what you think about that. I'd love to get your take on that.
Sure. So I don't know that I would say there is a right fit. I mean, look, as a provider, you know, obviously I say everybody could be a client. So it's the salesman in me. But I would say there is absolutely truth to the conversation of understanding what it is that you want out of the supplier. So if the idea there is, look, I want to give, you know, a company like, whether it's HCL or Cognizant or any of kind of, let's call them like the larger outsourcers that are out there, and say, look, I want you guys to come in and do $1 million project, but I'm going to expect you to bring every single thought piece and every single practice that you've got and just kind of educate me on all of these different things because you're in my building. That's where it's just a misaligned expectation, right? And it's not about revenue necessarily. I know what we try to look at is, and when we mean this, which is we look at the relationship much more through the lens of what's the value we're truly providing. So, you know, we try to say a lot, look, we're not in the single shingle outsourcing business. We try not to just be kind of like body based. I tell people all the time, if I like the fact that our customers may be very happy with the people that we have on the ground, but if they're looking at them as a single person and saying, I get value out of that person, then we've missed what we are there to do. And what I ask of our clients a lot is, in those early conversations, it becomes, what are you really looking for from us? Are you looking for us to help you with a project? Are you looking for us to be a thought leader for you? Are you looking for us to just take cost out of the equation? Or are you looking for us to truly be a partner with what you're trying to accomplish? And if the answer is yes to kind of that last piece, then I think it's much more intriguing to us, especially in today's environment with all the real big changes relative to, you know, digital solutions and what does tomorrow's consumer look for? What are those non-traditional business models that exist out there? I mean, and I think Vijay touched on this as well as Michael touching on this, which is the industry really is changing a lot, right? And it's the expectation around being able to say, I really do want to look at some unique ways of getting the solution, getting you as a provider and a partner some skin in the game, and actually having us really be a part of that growth of the organization, right? We've got a lot of clients now where we've definitely moved kind of past the traditional outsourcing contracting and in much more to, again, what we kind of call managed business models, which is, how does your business perform? What is your net promoter score? What's the growth of a given business unit? And we're responsible for those things. And we should be able to bring you know, capabilities kind of across the gamut for that. So I do think a big piece of it really is kind of saying, just what is it that your expectation is? Do we truly feel we can meet that? And you know, I'll kind of give, again, a very simple example. If someone were to say, you know, I really do like what you guys do. I worked with you in the past, and this happens pretty often where people say, I worked with you in the past. We had a big relationship. I really liked what Cognizant did, but I'm in a new role now. It's a smaller company. What I need is just a couple of people to help me with something, and maybe in 2 or 3 years, that might migrate into something else, but I need to help educate my company. That's where we'll traditionally look at that and say, you know, we're probably not the right fit for that, because you're going to get frustrated because you want all of the things that you have experience with us for. But we're going to look at that and say, look, every person I walk into the building costs me money. So, you know, it's not a matter of you just don't spend enough, but it's, you know, look, I got to really kind of start to question, where am I applying my resources? This has become such a robust industry where kind of the outsourcing model isn't unique anymore. So we do have to be very careful about where can we apply our resources in the best for our own business, in addition to how do we do that for our customers. So, and I do think there's the last piece of this answer is, the key important piece of that is, we try to look at that and say, let's not enter into a customer if we don't think we can do that, because they're going to get frustrated. We're not going to be able to deliver on that expectation, and it's just going to harm our relationships for the potential future. We'd be better off saying, we're probably not the right one for you. Maybe here's somebody else who might be, or if you'd like to do this in this kind of way, we might be the right customer or the right provider for you, just because then again, those expectations are aligned.
Hey, David, this is Michael. You just hit on something I'm very passionate about. One of the challenges, and we've talked about this at the IAOP in the past couple of years, is as a client, that is music to my ears. That is a single fastest way to build trust with me in a client provider relationship, when you have the confidence in your company's ability to tell me, hey, this isn't the right one, or at the right time, or hey, this isn't our core responsibility. Too often, and I'm sure when we get to Q&A, other clients out there will ask the same thing. We fall into the trap, and it erodes trust when our providers say that they can do everything, and they get somewhat annoyed if we're even talking about another provider that may specialize in that. So anyway, you hit on something I'm very passionate about. That builds instant trust with me when a provider says, hey, you know what, this probably isn't our core thing. You may want to go here for a better result.
Yeah, excellent. Good perspective on that. So look, Michael, let me stay with you on this next question. You know, they always say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And so what I'm thinking about here is, you know, what are the best ways to ensure that this whole customer-supplier relationship actually gets off on the right foot? And I think part of that last answer could be part of that. Hey, we're not it right now, or maybe we are. But yeah, what are some keys that you would supply for that?
I would go right back to what Vijay said in one of his earlier responses, is that like any relationship, this is like a marriage, right? And you have to treat it like that. It has to be a win-win right from the beginning. And it's going to take work to build trust and have communications, and each party has to be willing, you know, to compromise. And really the long-term value creation is only achieved when each party is committed to a bilateral relationship. So for me, it's kind of like, I use the analogy, you know, with my team. We need to have a win-win relationship, and it starts with the contract. If we're going to expect our providers to innovate and bring advances to our program, well, we have to compensate them fairly. The last thing I want is my provider coming into work every day thinking, all right, man, how do I keep my job because I signed this deal with such slim margins? If we're expecting innovation and we're expecting A talent, we have to pay for A talent. Otherwise, if you don't do that, it just creates noise in the relationship, you know, right from the beginning. And the last thing you want to do is pull out that contract a month into the relationship. And that analogy I use with my team is, you're not going to be married for 90 days and then go pull out the nuptials on the breakfast table and said, hey, you said you were going to do this. You know, you've got to look at it like Vijay said. These are long-term deals, long-term relationships. There's going to be fault on both sides. But if there's a clear business strategy with well-defined qualitative and quantitative expectations in the contract, and everybody knows it's, you know, we're going to hit some bumps, but we keep our eye on the prize. To me, that is critical in building long-term trust and confidence as partners.
Got it. Got it. So Vijay, let me come to you on SLAs, since you're out there in the marketplace talking to customers and selling to them the right outsourcing engagement for them based on their business needs. So we all know that SLAs are important, but they obviously are expectations that a customer has, and they just cover kind of the service the customer's bought, but there are so many other types of value from an outsourcing relationship that are not service level agreements. How do you guys work together, customer and supplier, to make sure that everybody gets full value out of that relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question. I say it like SLAs are great. They keep good check and balance on how we are performing, how the supplier is performing. But the focus is evolving more towards outcome-based innovation and driving revenue growth, as all of us talked about earlier. It is all about how we can go about avoiding the watermelon effect in a relationship. When I say watermelon, it is from outside, we have, everything is green. The supplier is meeting all the SLAs, but what is happening, the business is not happy. It's red from inside. How we go about in terms of creating an environment which is driving business SLAs, outcome-based, where I'm able to provide business uptime, where the supplier is able to elevate overall experience, how we go about shifting from operational SLAs to experience-based, outcome-based, SLAs. So let me give you, some examples, and these are like in any large outsourcing contract, there are multiple providers today. I'm sure Michael will echo. Michael will echo with me. Is that there will be multiple providers, and each of these providers are just focused on meeting their own SLAs. But end of the day, you have business applications which are down, and the customer is suffering. There are outages, but who is taking the responsibility? So it is can we create a forum where together all the suppliers come together and define business SLAs, and they have their equal skin in the game in terms of working towards achieving business uptime. We have, and we have seen such, mechanism working in some of the customers where we go about measuring experience-based SLAs. It is like turn the dial model, where maybe 70% of the fee is associated with operational SLAs, 30% outcome-based in year one of the engagement. As we move forward, we turn the dial, and we make more and more fees associated with experience and outcome-based. That's like driving the culture, of outcome-based, business-based SLAs. I'm gonna stop here. Yeah.
No, that's good. That's good. So Michael, from the customer side, you guys want the SLAs in the contract. So and obviously those are important, but there's other things you're looking for too. Well, how would you answer that same question? Working together to obtain the full value of the relationship.
Yeah. Obviously, having SLAs is a critical element, and like I said, it doesn't need to be dwelled on, but it does need to be there as part of the contract. It's there's internal policy, there's regulatory expectations that you would have that kind of guardrails in a contract to support the output. But again, everything is going to more of like a managed services or business services, and as a client, we need to manage the what. The what is the output versus the who or how many are doing it and how many are done. And what's critical to be able to do this, right? There's those of us that are in outsourcing a third-party risk, but our business partners, a lot of them, especially those doing it for the very first time, this is a new dynamic for them, going from managing people right outside their door to managing a third party to outcomes. So part of this is, what can we do to be better clients? We recognize where we actually have to provide real training and change management to all the folks that will be interfacing with our partner, during the selection, during the deal, but most importantly, after. They also have to have the good working relationships with the partner and building that trust and confidence. So it's preparing our organization to operate differently, and for us to have a real clear understanding of our business strategy and what our benefit expectations are, and then being very open and transparent with our partner that this is how internally we're going to measure success above and beyond service level agreements. And I know Vijay used the watermelon analogy. To me, service level agreements are kind of like leading indicators of how the overall relationship is going, right? You can fix SLAs, right? That's not rocket science. But very often, once a relationship goes bad, that's much harder to fix. So I think continuing that open, honest communication, having clear governance, and like I said, clearly defined qualitative and quantitative value expectations, and that's what we look at as a client, that we have to be very transparent with the expectations and ultimately how we're going to be valuing the relationship.
Got it. We actually have a question from one of our listeners here, and it's really around how the third-party advisors are driving the buyer patterns, compared to the direct dealing with the buyers. And as one of the things we've talked about is, this is very much like life, I guess. It's very much a relationship business, and building those relationships and understanding whether there's a good fit relationship-wise is an important aspect of a great relationship. So how does it change when the advisors are involved in all of that upfront process? And does it make it easier, make it more difficult? And I'm going to leave that open to just about anyone who wants to step in and answer that.
So hey, this is Dave. I'll be happy to maybe take a first pass at it.
Okay.
So I think there's actually value. There's good and bad to all of it, right? And I say that through this lens. I think third-party advisors can be very helpful to customers think through the complexities of the things that they are about to get into. So I think there's a lot of value from the standpoint of look, what exactly is it that you're trying to do? You have to think about the things that you're trying to get at. How do you include all the elements, and what should you be thinking about as to the various strengths and weaknesses of some of the providers that are out there or anything else? So I think that idea of saying, don't try to learn this on your own, because to be honest with you, it's gotten so complex and kind of so overwhelming at times that the idea of just saying, hey, we'll figure it out as we go, is probably going to put you in a negative position. But I would say then the flip side of that becomes, and this is maybe the negative if you want to think about it, is when you start, though, I think at times, like anything, some of the advisors can fall into the trap of saying a deal is a deal is a deal, right? So we hear all the time, well, I know you've agreed to this before, or I know, and we have clients that will say, well, look, I know our advisors telling us that you guys have done this before, so why won't you do it for us? And first and foremost, I almost always feel like saying that you do realize they're in breach of contract for telling you that, for one, but then two, every deal is different. And that's really the point that I was making before, which is, what is it that you're looking to accomplish out of this? There are elements that we might say, look, I'm willing to maybe accept a little bit more risk on something because I know you're looking for me to push the bounds. And if I know we're partners in that journey, I'm okay with that. But vice versa, it might be a client that I know is going to hold up the contract every day and say, this is what you signed up for. This is what I want out of you. You either do it or I want penalties against this. People that look at kind of earlier to the conversation on SLAs, if you're looking at those as punitive things where you say, I'm going to drive my cost down by charging penalties to my provider, those are the things that will start to drive wedges into the cracks, right? And the way I used to always look at it was, you say, look, we try to build our relationship on a solid foundation, but it's like water that gets into the cracks of that then freezes, and it starts to just spread them out. And as you get cold with one another, the water expands, the cracks get bigger, and eventually pieces start falling off. So that's kind of how I've looked at it through the years, to say, look, I think there's a lot of value to those third-party providers, but there are some things you just need to be careful of when you do it, that says, make sure they're keeping your needs in mind, make sure they're understanding the nuances of what you want out of that provider. And then maybe the last piece is, if you use them as a go-between between us as providers and you as the customer, you're going to inherently lose a lot of value. So I do think you still need to make sure you're very open, very clear, answer questions that we ask. I mean, I don't know how many times we've already passed the question phase of this. You can't ask any more questions. And I kind of look at it and go, well, that seems silly. So, you know, if we're trying to clarify what you're asking for here, you should want me to be as clear as I can possibly be. So those are things that say there's three parties there. Make sure they all are working in concert for your best interests. Because if it's adversarial, the one thing I can guarantee you is you're not going to get what you're looking for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love the analogy about the water and the cracks, you know, living in a place where we have potholes like crazy. That makes a lot of sense. You know, Michael, from the customer side, you guys a lot of times are bringing the advisors to the table. What would your viewpoint be on that?
Oh, I agree with David. As a client, you have to establish that relationship regardless of whether you're using an advisor to help you through the process. And again, I think it goes back to being self-aware as an organization and as a client, where you are in your outsourcing maturity life cycle, and what you're about to engage in an outsourcing deal on. If it's something cutting edge that you haven't done for yourself, then I think it's very advisable to use an advisor who knows the key players in the market, knows the the current operating models, and to help you avoid some of those potholes. And then there's situations where you have to look, and if this is someone that's taking this on, unfortunately, in an organization as a night job, then it definitely helps to have that guidance and support through that process. If you're more dedicated and it's something that you've already outsourced and you're looking to expand, then then maybe you don't need that enhanced external support. So I think it starts with just understanding what you're trying to do. Do you have any internal expertise in that competency and where you are in your life cycle, and then make that decision on using a provider. But I think they can add tremendous value in the right situations, or it can be for convenience.
Got it. Well, so as I knew, we certainly have a lot more questions than we have time for. And I was actually originally going to end with something from both perspectives, kind of outlining what a strong relationship looks like. I think that'll take a while. And, is there one element that rises above all else? But I think I'm going to pass on that. We do have one more question from the audience, and I think this is probably really relevant here. And the question really is, and I'd love to get just the quick, if possible, 30 to 45 seconds from each of you on this, and then we're going to do a quick wrap up because we have 4 minutes left. So the question really is there's been an emphasis on the trust relationship and that kind of thing in this web meeting. How would you, let's say you lost trust, let's say it went away, how would you rebuild trust with a customer? I guess I'll probably start with my suppliers. Vijay, how would you rebuild trust?
Yeah, I mean, if you see, one of the core ingredients of trust is being transparent. And being transparent over a period of time builds the trust. So if you have lost the trust, try to bring in more transparency. Be honest with your with your customer. And that's the way you will be able to earn trust. That's my thought.
Okay, I like that. David, how would you answer that?
Sorry about that. I had to mute there for a second.
That's okay.
I would agree. So I would say, I suppose, look, if trust is kind of broken down, I think there's an element by which you really need to be honest with both parties, where I always kind of say it this way, you both need to kind of be the adult in the room that says, look, we know what happened, and hopefully you both kind of know where things maybe went awry. But we say, look, let's not focus on the past, let's focus on the future, let's reset where we are right here. Here's what has happened in the past. This is why we kind of tended to lose the trust that we had in one another. Let's both commit to kind of turning that around. And on the provider side, that means if it's things like, hey, maybe delivery didn't go so well, then let's beef up where we are there. Let's put some, I always kind of say, let's overclub that problem for a while. So, and on the customer side, the same thing. If it becomes, you know, look, I can't have bad mouthing. I mean, as an example, I've had a customer in the past that you know, started sending pictures around of like kindergarten people to their own staff saying, this is, you know, our team trying to solve problems. And there's things like that just don't help, right? So, so it's those things that say, so we know what happened, let's stop those behaviors, let's both commit to this. And I do think there's a certain level of which it has to happen at an executive level as well. I mean, that's where I get involved in a lot of these things at times and say, I'm going to be here, I am going to oversee this with people, I'm going to make sure we've got the right things going on. And if anybody steps out of line from my team, I'm going to put them back in their place so that we all make sure that kind of accountability is there to turn the relationship around and have very specific checkpoints around how are we doing, what else are we doing around this, and how do we make sure that we're both getting the most out of where we're going.
Yeah, it certainly does take good leadership to make that happen, it sounds like. So Michael, maybe as a customer, you've had some suppliers and they've lost some trust, or you've lost some trust in them. What have they done to re-earn yours?
Absolutely be transparent. They've come in and say, hey, this is not what we expected. This is not how we deliver. This is the root cause, and this is our plan to remediate it. And then I feel our responsibility as a client is not to look at that incident with dollar signs. Like I believe David was saying, you can't look at everything punitively, and you can't pull out that contract, right? You know, that contract tends to be a hammer, you know, when everything looks like a nail. Be very transparent, very honest, and say, hey, we're all in this together. And again, it takes that executive leadership to say, hey, nobody said this thing was going to go perfectly. This shouldn't be a surprise to us that something happened. It should be a surprise to us if we can't all get around the table and fix it.
Oh, actually, I love that last comment. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to reference you if you don't mind. I think that's fantastic. Well, we're just within a few seconds of our stop time. I want to thank Michael, Vijay, and David for this discussion. You have been absolutely fantastic. You've raised amazing points. It's good to see that you're all in agreement. Adults are in agreement. It's kind of a we thing, like we're all in this together, and it's very evident to me that you share very similar views. So I just want to thank, I'm sure the audience has given you a big virtual applause right now. I'm sorry you can't hear that. I can only hear it on the side piece of my headphone here, all that applause. So I hope to see, I think Michael will probably see at IAOP maybe in February. I don't know if we'll see Vijay and David. I hope so. But I just want to wrap this up by just quickly talking about the chapter stuff that's come up, sales and marketing chapter. We have some meetings that we're looking at for 2019 and 2020, but even though we have topics laid out there, what we really want are topics that you want to hear. So we're looking for panelists, we're looking for presenters, we're looking for additional relevant topics. Kind of same goes for the Voice of the Customer chapter. They're looking at some things that are next, but in the end of the day, they want the topics that you want to hear about. So a special thanks to the panelists, special thanks to Sherry and Nicole for helping us put this on. I've really enjoyed being a part of this, and I hope that you'll keep an eye out for the next web meetings from both the Voice of the Customer chapter and the Sales and Marketing chapter. So everyone have a fantastic day or night wherever you are, and we'll see you next time around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.